This is beautiful. What is that, velvet?
Peace and love is the key.
You are now about to experience the J&J-Life podcast with your host, Reya'Sekmet.
But my name combines Raya, which means a connection to Ra. J&J-Life podcast. Please smash that like button. Peace and love is Vicky. Peace and well, family. I'm Reya'Sekmet. You are now tuned into the J&J-Life podcast, where we don't just decode the lies, we reconstruct the truth. As always, we have the conscious Lux Barbara Star joining us today. So, family, today's episode is not for the faint at heart. We are deeply honored to welcome back one of our master decoders. He's not just a warrior historian, he's a truth teller, historian, and a national political commentator. And he's the founder of the African History Network. You see him on the Roland Martin Show, and he's doing great work, I might add. Please welcome Baba Michael Imhotep back to the show. How are you doing, Baba Michael?
I'm all right, sister. How you and your father doing?
All is well.
All right.
Ashe. And family, if you thought his first visit was fire, then you're in for a ride today, because today we are turning up the heat, because we're talking about Columbus, family. And did you know Columbus was born Christopher Colombo in Genoa, Italy in 1451. In Spain, he adopted the name Cristobal Colon. In a Latin text, he appears as Christopher Columbus. The name shift wasn't just language, it was political, aligning him with Spanish royal ambitions. We're also going to talk about the myth of Thanksgiving and the weaponization of holidays. And hopefully we'll have time to wrap up the show with an overview and or breakdown of other so-called holidays and more. But if we happen to run out of time during this episode, we hope Baba Michael might grace us again in the future to continue this conversation, especially around the other holidays we won't get to cover this go-around. But if not, you'll still get the gist of it. With that said, let's get straight into it. Okay, so Baba Michael, let's start with the lie that launched 1,000 textbooks, and that is the story of Columbus. And
Sure.
Here's what I've come to know. Columbus
Okay.
did not discover anything, but he did invade. And he did claim the land in the name of Jesus Christ, but he was a devil to the people. Columbus, also known as Cristobal Colon, enslaved, raped, mutilated, and massacred the indigenous populations. I've also come to know through my research that a high percentage of people he encountered were African, and what we call today the Americas. So, Baba Michael, I'm trying to get a clear understanding, as I've just begun my reading with my Barbara Sar and Nana Moot. The first Americas were Africans by the ancestor Dr. David Imhotep, where he said we had been the Americas for over 51,000 years. I've also began studying They Came Before Columbus by the ancestor Baba Ivan van Sertima. So again, Baba Michael, that was a lot of words to get to my question, but I would like to know from your perspective, what's the real story of Columbus? What is the real truth behind October 12th? 1492. And if you want to share your screen with some slides, Baba, to help the family follow along, please go right ahead. The class is yours.
All right, thanks. Okay, so October 12th, 1492, Columbus lands in what we today call the Bahamas. And he called it San Salvador, which means Saint Savior. He said he named it after his Savior, Jesus the Christ. To really understand Christopher Columbus, and you're correct, no, he did not discover America. There were millions of people already here. There's myths surrounding Columbus, okay? So, and the way I teach this in class is to understand Christopher Columbus, really, you got to understand the previous 700-800 years of history to even understand how we get to that. But number one, Columbus never came to the land that we call the United States of America. The closest he came here was Cuba, which is 90 miles away. Okay, he goes into the Caribbean and he goes into South America. Okay, he makes 4 voyages from August 3rd, 1492 to he makes 4 voyages starting August 3rd, 1492, and we know he dies in 1506. Okay, so what Columbus is going to do is to drastically expand the European exploration, the exploitation of indigenous people as well as African people, and colonialism. This is what's going to take place. So it's important for us to understand Christopher Columbus, but not celebrate him. He's a master of genocide. One of the good books on dealing with Christopher Columbus is by our ancestor, Dr. John Henrik Clarke, Christopher Columbus and the African Holocaust, Slavery and the Rise of European Capitalism. And I got this copy in July 1994. So the newer copies don't have this cover. I got this when I was in college at Wayne State University here in Detroit. So you talked about our ancestor and my friend, Dr. David Imhotep, who wrote the book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence. And as the evidence shows, and as Dr. David Imhotep talked about, the short-statured Africans known as the Khoisan had traveled all around the world. They have the oldest DNA on the planet, and they were in the area that is today the South Carolina, Georgia area, going back at least 51,000 years ago. And this was discovered, there was an archaeological discovery in 2013 by Dr. Albert Goodyear, who's an archaeologist at the University of South Carolina. And they found 13 different types of evidence to document this African presence going back at least 50,000 years ago. So when we deal with Christopher Columbus, it's important to really understand that Columbus didn't really become important in America till about 1792, okay? And he was celebrated by Italians who were here in America. So we're talking about 300 years after that, okay, after 1492. And then there's a celebration for Christopher Columbus in New York in 1792, but it's going to become a federal holiday. It's going to be celebrated nationally, I should say, in 1892, and it was designed to be a one-time celebration. This was a proclamation from President Benjamin Harrison in 1892, and this was the same year as the 400th year commemoration of Columbus setting sail on his first of 4 voyages. And part of the reason why President Benjamin Harrison did this proclamation is the year before, in 1891, in New Orleans, you had 11 Italian Americans who were lynched. Okay, they were killed unjustly, and as a way to appease the Italian American population here in this country, he did a proclamation for a national celebration honoring Christopher Columbus and, you know, the contributions Italians made to this country, things of this nature. Okay, so when we talk about Columbus in school, oftentimes you'll have, or just when we deal with the history of Columbus, a lot of times you have African Americans who will want to run away from that history and not talk about it, because we know there were already millions of people in the Caribbean and South America, things like that, when he arrives. But Columbus is crucial to understanding the expansion of the transatlantic slave trade. Okay, and and a lot of the places where people like to go on vacation, Jamaica, for instance, okay, were discovered, were conquered and colonized by Christopher Columbus. And then when we talk about the Haitian Revolution, right, 1791, you can't talk about Haiti without talking about Columbus, because it was the island of Hispaniola that Columbus lands on December 6, 1492, and that's going to become a Spanish colony before it was a French colony in 1697. The Spanish and the French were fighting over that island land of Hispaniola, And where today we have the Dominican Republic and Haiti. And in 1697, France takes control of the western third of that island, and they call it Saint Dominique. Okay, the Africans are going to call it Haiti, which becomes Haiti, right? So when getting deep into this history, and when I started formulating the main history class that I teach, dealing with understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what it didn't teach you in school, and ancient Kemet and the Moors, things of this nature, I started really understanding the chronology of this history and how, even though Columbus was a master of genocide, how central he was to the expansion of Spain and the expansion of the transatlantic slave trade, things of this nature.
Ashe. Well, Michael, thank you for breaking that down. So when we talk about Africans being here before Columbus, those connections were just coincidental. What kind of evidence really confirms that presence?
Okay, so if we look here, and I'm going to try to do a screen share. Let's try to do this. I'm going to go to...
Do you ever get any pushback on the information? I asked because I have seen a snippet of one of your presentations, and you had some people who was trying to challenge maybe a piece of the information that you were providing, but you had to let them know, like, there may be some things you may hear that may be outside of your understanding.
Yeah, circumference of awareness, outside of the circumference of your own awareness. Yeah.
Yeah. I was just wondering, do you ever get anybody or people in your walk pushing back a little bit?
Well, you get that here and there, but I come with the evidence. I deal with facts and evidence. Proper documentation ends all conversation. Was this a lecture I was doing? Was this an interview, or was this a video?
It wasn't an interview, but it was on your podcast, and it looked like you had a big screen in the back, maybe a teleprompter or...
Oh, that was probably a lecture I was doing. That was an in-person lecture.
It's been some years ago. I don't know when, but I think it's been at least a few years.
Yeah. What was the subject matter?
Christopher Columbus, maybe Halloween.
Oh, yeah. I did do a lecture. I think that may have been about 10 years ago, dealing with Christopher Columbus and the African Holocaust, something like that. Yeah. You'll get that, but usually you're talking to people that haven't studied that information.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So can you see the slide on the screen?
No.
Oh, okay. Let me do the screen share. Hold on.
And thanks for the clarity. I just wasn't sure. I don't want to put out any misinformation, especially when I'm teaching the young one.
Oh, no. It's all right. It's all right. Okay. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So this is a slide from my class, and I've rebranded the class as Ancient Empires, the Moors, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade. We deal with history from 5000 BC up until 1800 Common Era, or AD. So Dr. David Imhotep wrote the book, The First Americans or Africans, Documented Evidence. On page 14 of his book, he talks about a discovery that Dr. Albert Goodyear made in Allendale County, South Carolina in 2013. And they found 13 different types of evidence documenting this African presence. They found artifacts, architecture, campsites, carvings, Egyptian writings, footprints in lava, genetic M174D haploid groups dealing with DNA and genetics, linguistics, paintings, skulls, skeletons, structures, and tools. They found 13 different types of evidence. Now, the mainstream archaeological structure, or mainstream archaeology, tries to refute any evidence that undermines their notion of the Clovis culture discovery in New Mexico, that basically says that humans were, or modern man, Homo sapiens, were first here about 13,500 BC, somewhere around there. Okay, any information that comes out, any evidence that comes out that undermines that, they try to refute that. Okay. And there have been numerous archaeological discoveries that have come out, say about maybe past 15, 20 years or so, somewhere around there, that show a presence of humans prior to 13,500 BC here in the land that we call the United States of America. Now, this article right here, this is from ScienceDaily.com. ScienceDaily.com is a scientific website. They talk about scientific discoveries, archaeological discoveries, things of this nature. This article is from actually his discovery was in 2004. I don't know why I said 2013. Yeah, 2004. Maybe it's because there's 13 different types of evidence. But right. This was a discovery 21 years ago, but 2004, November 18, 2004, ScienceDaily.com had this article. New evidence puts man in North America 50,000 years ago. Okay. And a summary of the article, and this is the summary from ScienceDaily.com, not my summary. They said radiocarbon tests of carbonized plant remains where artifacts were unearthed last May along the Savannah River in Allendale County, that's Allendale County, South Carolina, by University of South Carolina archaeologist Dr. Albert Goodyear, indicate that the sediments containing these artifacts are at least 50,000 years old, meaning that humans inhabited North America long before the last ice age. Now, we know that the Khoisan, who have the oldest DNA on the planet and are the short-statured Africans, they're derisively called pygmy, or they're called bushmen, things of this nature. But we know the Khoisan have the oldest DNA on the planet, and their ancestral line dates back 100,000 years ago. There was an article from Science Magazine in October of 2012 that broke this down as well. So what we're talking about, those Africans that were here tens of thousands of years ago, these were the Khoisan. And this is something that Dr. David Imhotep deals with in his work and in the interviews. I interviewed him about 13 times on the African History Network show. He's an ancestor now. This is the type of information that he's dealing with. And the Khoisan go all around the world. Okay. And when the Genome Project did this, took samples of DNA from people all around the world, they found that the Khoisan had the oldest DNA on the planet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's powerful. Well, give me 1 second here.
Okay.
Let's see. Okay. All right. Yeah, that's powerful, Baba. You know.
Thanks.
There's pieces of that I wasn't clear about, but I did catch several of your interviews with ancestor Baba David Imhotep.
Yeah, well, I'm going to re-air the last one I did with them in 2021. I'm going to re-air that today and tomorrow because this is Indigenous Peoples Day / Columbus Day for those that celebrate it. But you have forces trying to bring back Columbus Day as well, revive it. The
like
same
that proclamation that was just signed.
Right. Well, the same people that want to bring back Columbus Day, right, are the same people who want to resurrect Confederate monuments.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the same people who are celebrating white supremacy and trying to make and the same people who are trying to sanitize the Smithsonian African American Museum, okay, and say it focuses too much on slavery and it's divisive and things like this. No, it's dealing with real history. Now, many of us have said, myself as well as Tony Browder, and I interviewed Tony Browder on my show, and he talked about this. He said it's a fantastic museum. I'm paraphrasing, but he said the only criticism he had was it did not deal with the history of African people prior to slavery. Okay, right. But you got to deal with the history of slavery. You have too many people in this country that want to sanitize that history, don't want to deal with it because the structural inequities that exist today, okay, are the legacy of slavery. Okay, when you deal with the 8-to-1 racial wealth gap, when you deal with African American homes being undervalued by approximately $156 billion, when you deal with African Americans being overtaxed when it comes to property taxes by approximately $600 billion since the end of slavery, as Andrew Carl talked about in his recent book, and I dealt with on the African History Network show. When you deal with these structural inequities, they are the legacy of slavery. So one of the things that Project 2025 is dealing with is attacking that history, because they don't want to have to deal with any policies to repair the damage of a legacy of slavery. Okay, so let's borrow, let's corrupt Dr. King's words, August 28th, 1963, in his speech that was called A Cancelled Check, later called I Have a Dream, where he talks about his children not being judged by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. You have people who want to take that and then say, oh, well, we want a colorblind society where everything's equal, but you don't want to deal with repairing the damage of the laws and policies from the past 150 plus years.
Right.
This is the game that's being played.
Yeah. You brought up a few things that I want to come back. I'm gonna circle back around on because I really want to, get your thoughts on what some of the other things that you just said.
Okay.
And yeah, Bible, we're taught to celebrate Columbus to honor genocide as exploration. I've come to know that's not education, that's indoctrination. I'm just making sure what you're saying, and that there is both historical documentation and cultural overlap that point to African arriving long before 1492. And that challenges the whole idea of Columbus as a discoverer. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, not only that, I mean, Leif Erikson was in North America. The Viking was in North America and quote unquote discovered Vinland around 1000 AD. So Leif Erikson was in North America before Christopher Columbus, 500 years before Columbus was close to 500 years before Columbus was even born. So this whole narrative really comes about with you have Italian Americans advocating for a celebration of Columbus after the proclamation in 1892 by President Benjamin Harrison. It's going to become a federal holiday in 1937, officially a federal holiday celebrated annually, and that was signed into law by President Franklin Roosevelt. But you're going to have this whole fake narrative used to, just perpetuate more white supremacy. So you have a decimation of the indigenous people in the Caribbean, Native Americans, as well as Africans. Dr. David Imhotep he talks about how 70% of the people that Columbus encountered on his 4 voyages, were African people. And then you're going to have this just a total whitewashing of the history that takes place. So even when we look at, say, if we just look at the United States, okay,
right,
not the Caribbean, but just the United States, Africans were taken into the territory called the South Carolina, Georgia territory in 1526 by the Spanish. That's 93 years before Virginia, 1619.
Right.
Okay. But so, that's not even talked about. So we have to correct how a lot of this history is being taught. That doesn't mean that you don't teach the history of Christopher Columbus. Yes, you have to. But it is putting Columbus in the proper perspective and understanding the genocide that Columbus brought. The proclamation that Donald Trump just did a few days ago doesn't really address that. It just celebrates Columbus as an explorer, and it's appealing to Italian Americans, things of this nature. It's a total distortion of the history, but and Trump is not celebrating Indigenous Peoples Day, because a lot of cities had replaced Columbus Day with Indigenous Peoples Day, and really honoring Native Americans, recognizing the genocide that was inflicted upon them. And in 2021, then President Joe Biden signed a proclamation declaring Indigenous Peoples Day. Okay. Well, Trump is reversing all that, but all this is part of Project 2025. Project 2025 is dealing with eradicating the racial justice movement and accomplishments of the racial justice movement after the killing of George Floyd. So all this took place after George Floyd, even though you had some cities going back to, say, 2017 starting to adopt Indigenous Peoples Day, right? It's really after the death of George Floyd, May 20th, 2020, that we really start seeing a lot of this stuff accelerate.
Right.
Okay. And with the Biden-Harris administration, they were putting a lot of these policies in place. All this is being eradicated now. Okay, all this is being eradicated now, to the point where on Trump's second day in office, he revokes Executive Order 11246, which was affirmative action signed into law by President Lyndon Johnson in 1965. So because people didn't understand how to put together these pieces and understand this history, we didn't understand how to perceive threats and how to stop threats. Okay.
Yeah.
And one of the things that the history teaches you to do is to understand how to perceive threats and understand how history doesn't repeat itself, but it definitely rhymes. And there's always been there's always a white backlash to periods of advancement or perceived periods of advancement that African Americans have made.
Facts. And I have to say that I remember watching one of your episodes, and you were talking about Project 2025. Back, way before this all started to roll out.
I first started talking about it in 2023, because Project 2025 came out from the Heritage Foundation in April 2023. I was talking about it going back then, because I already knew who the Heritage Foundation was. I was very familiar with them. And what a lot of people don't know is that Project 2025 is called Mandate for Leadership, the Conservative Promise. The Heritage Foundation has been putting out their policy playbook, Mandate for Leadership, the Conservative Promise, each election cycle going back to 1981. They've been doing this over 40 years. Okay. It just really became exposed because Taraji P. Henson at the BET Awards in 2024, July 2024, talked about it. And then overnight, it started trending on Google with Google searches, because people didn't know what she was talking about.
Right.
They've been putting this in, to show you how diabolical this is. When they put out Mandate for Leadership, the Conservative Promise in 1981, it was in book form, and it became a New York Times bestseller. Okay. President Ronald Reagan gave a copy of it to all of his cabinet members. This is how long they've been doing this. And the Reagan administration, in Reagan's first term, adopted about 60% of the policy recommendations for Mandate for Leadership from the Heritage Foundation.
Right. Yeah, no, yeah, you absolutely right. And I just wanted to mention real quick
Go ahead.
that I'm not an expert on Project 2025, but I can say that after seeing you talk about it, and I'm talking about a couple of years ago, I didn't even know what it was, but just because you were putting it out there, I had already been following you, and I was like, let me dive into this. And so when I started seeing it and reading what was in it, I started thinking, what can I do from my seat right here in little old Iowa? But I realized that there's a lot that I can do, because this state is being hit hard for the less than 4% that are African American in this state. So yeah, we catching hell. So I tried to do my best out here in the public with spreading the information, but you know, it's an uphill battle. Bob Michael.
No, I understand. I
Bob
understand.
Michael,
Yes.
before Columbus sailed, Europe had expelled the Moors, and I'm just starting to know about the Moors and that they were African people. I believe some come from Sudan, Egypt, and or North Africa, and they did a lot of amazing things. Yeah. But who were the Moors exactly, and what did they contribute?
Well, the Moors, generally speaking, were groups of African people coming from North Africa and West Africa. And the term Moor comes from moros amongst the Greeks and moros amongst the Italians in Latin. And you're going to have them, they take the teachings of the Nile Valley region of Africa into Europe, and is going to bring Europe out of what's called the Dark Ages. Okay. So they're going to go in basically 1492, basically 711 AD. They're going to go in, led by Tariq ibn Ziyad, and they're going to defeat the Vandals and the Visigoths. When you look at a map, you see that what was then called the Iberian Peninsula is right above Morocco, okay? And they're going from Morocco right into the Iberian Peninsula, all right? Now, what you're dealing with is they're going to conquer the Vandals and the Visigoths, and they're going to conquer the Vandals and the Visigoths, and they're going to settle in southern what today we call Spain, in that area. At that time, it was the Iberian Peninsula, and they're going to go all throughout Europe. They're going to basically civilize Europe. They take in art, architecture, science, mathematics, astronomy, literature. They take different types of foods into Europe. They're going to teach the Europeans how to bathe. They're going to introduce new ways of weaving silk.
Right there,
go ahead. Go ahead.
You just hear what he just said? These brothers, these Moors, our family, our people, went into this area to show these people how to bathe. Can you imagine somebody being unclean? Wow. I just wanted to make sure the family caught that. They went into this area to teach them how to basically clean themselves, family, clean themselves.
So they're gonna go, and that's gonna be a result of it. That wasn't the purpose of them going in, but that's gonna be a result of it. They're gonna show, because you have to understand that at this period of time in 711 AD, the western portion of the Roman Empire falls in 476 AD. The Vandals and the Visigoths crushed that. And this is looked at was pushing Europe into this period of time, the medieval time, or what's called the Dark Ages. So you have, rampant disease because they're not bathing. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so this is one of the things that the Moors are going to do. They're going to help set up universities in Europe as well. And you're going to have they're going to go into Australia, they go into England, they go into France, and they're also going to intermix into the European bloodline. Okay. Mm-hmm. And that is something very important, because they're going to various extents, they're going to change the complexion of Europeans as well. Okay. As they intermix into the European population, they're going to change the complexion. And Runoko Rashidi in his book, Black
History
Star,
ancestor.
yeah, Black Star, the African presence in Europe.
Mhm.
This excellent book right here, which deals with a lot of the history of the Moors in throughout Europe. He shows you different statues of and paintings of Europeans, I mean of the Moors all throughout Europe. Okay. And we know that so for instance, if we look here, right here, page 90. Okay, page 90 in his book, you see the Black Madonna and Child.
Yeah.
And Europeans were already worshiping the Black Madonna and Child before the Moors even go in.
What was the name of that book again?
This is Black Star, the African Presence in Early Europe by Runoko Rashidi. Okay. So we know that Runoko's Jedna was Dr. Ivan van Sertima, and Dr. Ivan van Sertima edited Golden Age of the Moor. Okay. Yep. And this is a Golden Age of the Moors, a collection of essays. Runoko Rashidi has one in here. Dr. Jose Pimenta Bay, Dr. John G. Jackson, Jan Carew. Dr. Ivan Van Sertima has an essay in here as well. Fantastic. One of the best books dealing with the history of the Moors during the medieval time. But what we're going to see now, so I interviewed Runoko. I got this book November 4th, 2011. Okay. And I interviewed Runoko either 2000, I think 2000, right around that time, 2011, 2012. But I interviewed him about this book. And on page 91 in his book, I saw this right here. And this is the national flag of Sardinia in Italy. Mm-hmm. And it has the 4 Moors heads, right? Yep. So I started doing research on this, and he talked about it also, because I'm like, okay, I know the history of the Moors and things like this, and they go all throughout Europe, but you see it's a blind, or you see it's a headband, right? Yes. Originally, the original depiction was a blindfold to show that they were prisoners, because the Moors were in in Sardinia, and it took a monumental effort of the Italians to defeat them. Okay, but because of tourism and to be politically correct, things like this, they changed it from a blindfold to a headband. Mm-hmm. And I went in doing research, I went to the official website for Sardinia for their tourism. And they on their various pages, and they changed the location of it on the different pages. They had this flag with the African Moors heads on it. Okay. Mm-hmm. So when you start getting into this history, right, and you start looking at these different images, then that takes you back into history, and then you start connecting the dots to bring this, to connect the Moors to Columbus. The Moors lose control of their last stronghold, Granada, January 2nd, 1492, okay, mm-hmm. which was under Spanish control. And it's going to be late in 1492 that, well, first of all, with the defeat of the Moors in Granada, what's called the Reconquista is complete. The Reconquista is the reconquest, and now it's the effort of Spain to take back control of the areas that the Moors had control of. And mm-hmm. the Reconquista begins about 722 AD. So the Reconquista is complete. Then August 2nd, 1492, the day before Columbus set sail, the Spain expels the Sephardic Jews, the Sephardim, mm-hmm. out of Spain as well. Okay. Now it took Columbus lobbied King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella about 7 years to get them to finance his voyage. Okay. But he's going to set sail with them having defeated the Moors. Okay. Now they can focus on this exploration and financing this financing this exploration. But when you start putting together the pieces of the puzzle, and then to understand Columbus, you got to understand 700-800 years of history before Columbus, what leads to that. And that deals with the history of the Moors in Europe, especially Spain.
Yeah. And I don't know about you, Baba, but I went through public school, unfortunately, and my history teacher was garbage because I didn't learn none of this stuff until after I got out of college.
Right.
I mean, doing my own independent research on it. So that's pretty sad, to say, because here I'm talking about 30 plus years ago when I was in high school, and we've been getting social studies and stuff like that all the way back in elementary, and I don't remember majority of what you just said even being talked about in the classroom.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm trying to unlearn in real time and teach the correct information and plugging in those gaps, because I would just say that truth by omission is definitely a lie.
Right. Well, what I would say is even what they taught in social studies class, things like that, some of it is false, but I would probably say the greater majority of it is true or happened, but is other parts that they're leaving out, where if you understood the other parts of it, then the whole would make a lot of sense.
Exactly.
Okay. So if it's like, okay, let me go to this, if you don't mind, let me go to this slide for a minute. Okay. So I show this in my class. So here is, let's go to this map, just to give people understand geographically. Can you see this map?
Yes.
Okay. So the Iberian Peninsula, Spain, and what today we call Spain and Portugal, the area that the Moors settled in southern Spain, they're going to call that Al-Andalus. Okay. Basically means like to walk in the spiritual path or walk in the spiritual light, something to that effect. And you see Morocco is right below where they go in. Now, when they land, they go when they land in the Iberian Peninsula, where they land at, they're going to it's a mountain, and it's going to be called Jebel Tariq's mountain, and we know it as the Gibraltar. Okay, named after the Rock of Gibraltar, named after Jebel Tariq. That's where that comes from. Now, if we look here, let me see if I go. Okay, so the Moors' ancestors were known as the Garamantes. And the Garamantes were a Black African people living throughout North Africa. And we know Hannibal Barca of Carthage was a Garamantes. And we know Carthage historically was in the area that today is Tunisia, okay, in North Africa. So, Hannibal Barca and the Carthaginians fighting against the Romans during the Punic Wars, right? Publius Cornelius Scipio, who then, after the Battle of Zama in 202 BC, where Hannibal's defeated, Publius Cornelius Scipio takes the surname Africanus. Okay, Africa was not named after Publius Scipio Africanus. The name Africanus in Latin means belonging to Africa. He's going to take the surname Africanus after the Battle of Zama in 202 BC. Now, the Moors, according to George G.M. James in the book Stolen Legacy, were the custodians of the ancient Egyptian mystery system, and these teachings will bring Europe out of the Dark Ages. So when you study the Moors, you deal with the teachings from the Nile Valley region of Africa, going into Europe, right? Bringing Europe out of the Dark Ages, but also they're going to teach what's known as the Poor Knights of Christ, a group called the Poor Knights of Christ. And the Poor Knights of Christ are going to become known as the Knights Templar, all right? Okay. And then when the Knights Templar are disbanded in 1310, and a group of them are rounded up in France, Friday the 13th in 1310, the teachings are going to go underground and they're going to resurface as the Freemasons, as the Rosicrucians, things like this. These other, as Tony Browder calls them, societies with secrets. A lot of people call them secret societies. He calls them societies with secrets. So then a watered down version of these teachings come to the land we call the United States of America with the quote unquote founding fathers, because 50 of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence in 1776 were Freemasons. So this is how you get like the Washington Monument, which is a tekken, a symbol from ancient Kemet, dealing with the symbol of resurrection coming from the story of Asar, Aset, and Heru, things like this. You get those symbols of Freemasonry coming from Europe, brought into Europe by the Moors, coming from those teachings coming from the Nile Valley region of Africa. Okay, so when you start getting into this history, and then the word Moro is derived from the Greek word moros, which literally means black or a very dark color. And then the Romans called them Mari. You may see Maras with the US or Mari. And the word Mauritania means land of the black-skinned people. Okay. So the Mari were a Northwest African people who were very dark-skinned. The Romans will refer to that region of Northwest Africa as Mauritania. And if you read Golden Age of the Moor, edited by Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, pages 527 and 187, they break down this information here. So then, because when you start studying the history of the Moors, then you realize, okay, we're studying more than just a people. We're studying language. We're studying the lasting impact that they had all throughout Europe on architecture, on painting. But even when you look at Othello, the play from Shakespeare, okay, and he talks about, and Othello is a Moor in the Venice army, okay. So we start seeing the lasting impression that the Moors leave, even though there's a concerted effort to obfuscate, as Dr. Jose Pimenta Bay puts it, to obfuscate or distort the ethnicity of the Moors and make them European or make them Arabs. So when I was watching, years ago, when I was really starting to really study this information, I was watching the History Channel, and they had a documentary they had one series called The Barbarians, okay? And each installment dealt with a different group of barbarians: Anglo-Saxons, Jutes, Lombards, Picts, Vandals, Visigoths. But they had another companion series called The Dark Ages. And when they showed the Moors going into the Iberian Peninsula 711 AD, they depicted them as Arabs. Okay. They didn't say that these were African people. They didn't say these were Black African people, anything like that. Okay. So, and one of the things Dr. Jose Pimenta Bay talks about is how the word Moor has become synonymous with the word Arab. So then if you hear Moor, you automatically think they're talking about Arabs, and it has nothing to do with African people, when yeah, it has everything to do with African people. The majority of those Moors were African people, and they're dealing with African culture, okay, to various extents. So that's why it's important to get deep into this history. So then you start seeing the games that are being played with language. Okay, the games that are being played with language and identity,
and images, yeah,
absolutely. And then speaking of language, and then I'll have one more slide, and then I'll wrap it up with that for this segment. But variations of the word Moor, okay. Moreno in Spanish means dark complexion, now meaning brunette or dark hair. Mora in Spanish, originally a Moorish woman, now means blackberry, like the fruit. Mora in Italian means blackberry. Morasad in French, dark-skinned or blackamoor. And Morillon in French means black grape. Okay. And then lastly, in the book Before the Mayflower,
Okay.
second, 6th edition.
Is that LaRon Bennett?
Yeah, LaRon Bennett Jr., page 40.
Okay.
LaRon Bennett Jr. in this chapter, he's talking about history in the 13 colonies early on in the early 1600s. Okay. Before codified slave laws exist, starting with Massachusetts in 1641. Okay. And he says, of all of the improbable aspects of this situation, the oddest to modern blacks and whites is that white people did not seem to know that they were white. It appears from surviving evidence that the first white colonists had no concept of themselves as white people. The legal documents identified whites, people who we call white people, as Englishmen and or Christians. The word white, with its burden of arrogance and biological pride, developed late in the century as a direct result of slavery and the organized debasement of blacks. So basically, he's talking about after Bacon's rebellion in 1675, 1676, in the colony of Virginia, and the term white is really going to be introduced about 1681 in the colony of Virginia, and is going to be adopted by the other colonies. For a long time in colonial America, there was no legal name to focus white anxiety. The first blacks were called blackamoors, Moors, Negers, Negers, and Negars, Negars. The word negro, which is Spanish and which is a Spanish and Portuguese term for black, did not come into general use in Virginia until the latter part of the century, the latter part of the 1600s or the 17th century.
Understood.
Okay. But Michael, I've noticed that in many documentaries, the Moors are portrayed as light-skinned or Arab-looking people, almost sanitized, to say the least. My question is, how does this kind of visual misrepresentation impact our understanding on African history? And would you say it contributes more to erasure than education?
Yeah, it's designed to erase, it's designed to disconnect the Moors from Africa. Okay. Really? Because here's what happened. So like when I was in college, I first got introduced to the Moors probably by Dr. Yosef Ben Yakinen. Okay. He was one of the first people I really heard talk about the Moors and their impact they had on Europe. And then I read the book by Dr. Khalid Al-Mansour, Betrayal by Any Other Name. Okay. He talks about the Moors in there. I read Stolen Legacy by George G.M. James. He talks about the Moors, right? So then when you start filling in the blanks of what happened between pyramids and slavery, right? And you start understanding how everything the Moors taught Europeans came back to kick us in the behind. The Moors are going to introduce cotton into Europe. They're going to introduce sugar into Europe. And many Europeans get addicted to sugar. And one of the things that Columbus is going to do, and one of the things he was searching for, was another source of sugar as well. And we know they're going to start setting up these sugarcane plantations in like Jamaica and Haiti, things like this, even in Puerto Rico. Okay, because Columbus conquers the Boricuan, the island of Boricuan, which we call Puerto Rico. So when you have, did you see the movie Posse?
Yes.
Posse with Mario Van Peebles and Melvin Van Peebles, things like that. Okay, that movie takes place in 1898 during the Spanish-American War. Okay, and these guys are in the U.S. Army, right? The Spanish-American War is Cuba fighting against Spain for their independence because Cuba was conquered by Columbus on behalf of Spain.
Yep. Okay.
So a lot of people saw the movie Posse, but don't really understand the historical background that that movie is dealing with. Okay, so we can go from 1898 back to the 1490s and see how Cuba became a colony of Spain on behalf of Columbus, you know, by way of Columbus.
Yep.
But yeah, there's a concerted effort to using language and imagery to totally distort who the Moors were, because then if we knew that these were Black African people, then we would start asking more questions and start doing more research and looking at language. Okay.
Exactly.
Because if you go to I'm gonna pull it up and I'm gonna show it to you.
Okay.
Hold on. This is the Virginia it's the Virginia Slave Act. It's Virginia Slave Codes 17. These are 1705, I think it is. Hold on, let me see. Okay, the Virginia Slave Codes is 1705. I have a couple of different sources for this.
Okay.
The one that I want is Virginia Slave Codes. The one that I want, section 4, makes a distinction between, right here. Okay, let's look at this. It makes a distinction between Negroes and Moors. Okay, so let's look at, let me do the screen share right quick. This is from, what is this? Encyclopediavirginia.org. Encyclopediavirginia.org. Can you all see this?
Yes.
And that, okay. An act concerning servants and slaves, 1705. Okay. And I'm going to zoom in on this. Let's scroll down. Okay. It has the full text here. I want section 4. I think that's the section I want. Yeah, right here. Okay, section 4 of the Virginia Slave Codes says, hold on, let's see if I can get over to, okay, so you can see it. All right. And also be enacted by the authority aforesaid, and it is hereby enacted that all servants imported and brought into this country by sea or land who were, I can't see what that is. Let's see, by sea or land who were not Christians in their native country, except Turks and Moors, okay, in amity with Her Majesty and others that can make due proof of their being free in England or any other Christian country before they were shipped in order to transportation hither, shall be accounted and be slaves, and such be here bought and sold, notwithstanding a conversion to Christianity afterward. So what they're doing is they're making a distinction between Negroes and Moors.
Okay.
And the Moors are exempt, or the Moors are exempt from this. Okay. And this deals with after 1681, where the colony of Virginia has adopted the term white. And this was basically as a result of Bacon's rebellion of 1675 and 1676, where you had a band of about 500 rebels organized by Nathaniel Bacon, who was a wealthy plantation owner. But what they do is the rebels were made up of enslaved African people, free African Americans, poor white people, white indentured servants, poor white immigrants, things like this. They realized they were all being oppressed by the same ruling elite there in Virginia, the wealthy tobacco plantation owners, things of this nature. They organized for a rebellion and they burned down the town of Jamestown, Virginia. This is known as Bacon's Rebellion. It's going to be after Bacon's Rebellion that the ruling elite realized they need to break up that alliance between poor white people and African people and enslaved African people. They need to break up that alliance. So they're going to introduce the term white about 1681 to bring the poor white people and these white immigrants, things like this, bring them on team white. And they're going to put in different laws in place that distinguish how the African people are going to be treated and how white people are going to be treated. And then they're going to really institute the chattel slavery, because before then you're going to have largely indentured servitude, okay, where you serve for 5 to 7 years, something like that, or 3 to 5 years, what have you. And in 1680, the economy in England improves, and there are less white people willing to come to the English colonies here to become indentured servants. So they're going to start shifting more and rely on enslaving African people. Okay, so when you start understanding this chronology of history and language and law, then you start seeing how all this comes together. And today you see why there's a concerted effort to keep poor white people from uniting with African Americans.
Exactly. You good?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, family, if you haven't figured out by now, this conversation is rooted in receipts, not reactions. So if you hear something today that challenges what you were taught in school, church, or even your favorite documentary, pause before you push back. As Bob Michael Imhotep always says, right knowledge corrects wrong behavior, but you cannot correct what you have not researched. So, family, on the J&J-Life podcast, we empower and inspire people of African descent to not only become African-centered, but being African-centered with attention. Yes. I understand that correcting misbehavior begins with realigning thought, and I paraphrase what Baba Michael is saying.
What did Baba Michael say?
What you do for yourself, what you allow others to do to you, and what you do to others are reflected by what you believe about yourself. But that self-concept is shaped by what you've been taught about that self, or about yourself. And what you've been taught about yourself is shaped by what you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. And as the wisdom goes, when you control the radius of a man's thoughts, you control the area of his actions. A mind cannot do or teach when it does not know. And at the Mu Institute for Ancestral Learning, we're taught the restoration of knowing. So before you disagree, do your homework. Because what we're sharing isn't based on opinion. It's based on primary sources, African-centered scholarship, and decades of suppressed truth. We are not here to be provocative. We are here to be precise. It sometimes sounds like rebellion when you've been raised on revision. Baba Bear Shango goes on to say, to honor Columbus is to betray the ancestors. And family, we must reject his holidays, rewrite his textbooks, and re-anchor our memory inside Kofa consciousness.
Ashe. You've been waiting to get that off. Wow, haven't you?
Very good.
Very long time.
Yeah. And Baba Michael, I've come to understand through the wisdom of our ancestor, Dr. Baba David Imhotep.
Yes.
And peace be upon him, as I've said. And I just want to reiterate that, again, it was your show where I first saw him talking about his then new book, The First Americans Were African. So I immediately had to go out and get it because it just made me want to keep feeding my brain and and keep gaining knowledge about what was being talked about in his book, because I never heard of this stuff,
Right.
those years ago. It wasn't taught. But
Right.
And again, I'm also thankful for COVID, because when the world shut down, it put myself, my family, back into the books, doing the homework, doing the research, and doing what must be done to gain the information to plug those holes, as you have said, right? So I say all of that to say that interview and your interviews inspired me to do deeper dives. And I'm grateful for your interviews. So I just want to give you your flowers for that, because
thanks.
Because it connects with the works of like the Leakey family and Tracing Humans back in Africa over 4 million years ago and stuff like that, reinforcing the idea that all migration began from our soil, African soil. Mm-hmm. And I acknowledge that here we are in 2025, moving into 2026, and a quarter of a way done with this century, and here we are still confronting the Columbus myth. Only now, for me, not merely as an educator, but as a liberator. So my question to you, and you can answer it briefly or how you feel fit, but my question is, in your opinion, what does it mean for you to move from educating about these myths, or excuse me, about these truths, to actively liberating minds and reclaiming history in this moment? Because if I'm sharing this information with you and all the people that you've come across in your walks of life, I'm sure that I want to believe that other people have given you that reverence of the information that you do bring forth.
Okay, so I think the question is, how do we move from the information to actualization?
Absolutely.
Okay, so your thoughts create feelings, your feelings create actions and behaviors, your actions and behaviors create results. So we have to understand history, economics, law, and politics. History, economics, law, and politics. And understand that we have to actually put the information to usage, okay? Better decisions that are made, better decisions politically, economically, etc. So we have to have a understanding of all four, because politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, treaties, the adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. We understand that politics shapes the economy. The economy impacts us. Politics impacts us. Laws impact us as well. And the history is the driving force of all of this, okay? Historical movements are created to address conditions. Conditions were shaped by laws and policies. The historical movements are trying to get laws and policies put in place to address the conditions, okay? And then, so you have a cycle of this. So we have to look at the history teaches us how we got to where we are today, and also to understand where we need to go from here. And one of the mistakes that African Americans make is not understanding history and not understanding the white backlash that comes after periods of advancements that African Americans have made. What's taking place right now with the attack on DEI, regardless of how many Black people got jobs from DEI, and jobs from DEI is only one small impact of it. We're dealing with policies. We're dealing with grants that came from DEI, like grants from the Environmental Protection Agency, things of this nature. Okay, we're talking about investments in Black-owned businesses from corporations. So just looking at 4% of Black people got jobs from DEI or whatever, you don't even understand you don't even understand how deep this stuff is. Mm-hmm. Because what they're doing, they're going back in. I did a segment on the African History Network show recently that dealt with how Trump has wiped out 60 years of civil rights progress in about 2 months. Okay, mm-hmm. But if we understood Richard Nixon in 1968, who won the presidency as a backlash to the civil rights movement and the Black Power movement, okay, mm-hmm. we would have seen Trump coming in 2016 and coming back in 2024. All right. But because so many of our people are listening to Black social media disinformation agents focused on reality TV shows, things like this, we mm-hmm. don't understand how to perceive a threat. Okay. And you know, when you look at, and one of the things that they do, and it's important for people really to understand what Project 2025 is doing. What it's doing is putting in place at the federal level laws that have been put in place the past few years at the state level in Republican controlled states, mainly former Confederate states. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
In understanding that what we're seeing right now is a continuation of the U.S. Civil War and a continuation of the political backlash, as well as political violence that helped bring about an end to the Reconstruction era in 1877.
Mm-hmm.
So when you start understanding how all this history is connected, then you see why they are continue to attack the history of African Americans and how it's being taught. Cracking down, going after universities. These are totalitarian moves. You go after universities, you go after media, okay? You crack down on media being able to report accurately on certain subjects, things of this nature. And when you can control the history of the past and you can suppress people's ability to vote today,
Mm-hmm.
then you can control the policies of the future for decades. And this is the plan that's being played. But what they do to distract people is they say the reason why you don't have jobs, the reason why you don't have this, the reason why you don't have that is because of these undocumented immigrants over here.
Mm-hmm.
So they scapegoat a group, just like they scapegoated African Americans and said the reason why you don't have jobs, white people don't have jobs because of affirmative action.
Mm.
They'll scapegoat a group here, but they won't tell you why the unemployment for Black people went up to 7.5% in the August in the August unemployment report, right? But 1.2 million people, 1.2 million immigrants have left the U.S. workforce since February of 2025.
Mm.
But you said they're taking Black jobs. So how did the unemployment rate for Black people go up and not down? See,
exactly.
This goes back to Bacon's Rebellion, where the ruling elite realized they had to break up the alliance between the African people, the poor whites, things like this, to divide and conquer. So they're playing different groups against each other. This is what's taking place right now.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna call nobody out, but it seems like the people that I come across in my walk of life are those people you're talking about.
Yeah.
the miseducated,
right?
Misinformation.
Then before we move on to the next segment, I want to say you cannot be African-centered if your memory is controlled by your enemies. That means if the stories we tell come from the same people who stole our names, our land, and our languages, we ain't free. We're just repeating their lies. The ancestor Baba Ishaka Musa Shango taught that the greatest battle we face is against historical disinheritance. In his book, African People and European Holidays, a mental genocide, he exposed the dangerous celebration of figures like Columbus as cultural suicide. Why are we told to honor a man whose own crew recorded the rape of indigenous girls as young as 9 years old? Why are we taught that his arrival was brave when it led to enslavement and forced conversions and cultural destruction across continents? So October 12th, Columbus Day is not a holiday. It's actually a day of mourning because within decades of his voyages, the Portuguese and Spanish empires were already building African-centered routes. That's the transatlantic slave trade. That's genocide by design. That and this was intentional, not ignorance, but rather strategy.
So, but okay, and I can go on with that, and I don't want to hold up the show or anything like that. So,
sure,
I would just say, let's move on to that misgiving term.
Sure.
What commonly people call as Thanksgiving. And Baba, what are we really commemorating when we gather around that table on that day when people are being festive, right? because when we strip away the sanitized stories of pilgrims and feasts, what's left is a legacy of land theft, genocide, and forced erasure. So basically, how do we begin to tell the truth about this holiday without losing our people in the discomfort of it? And what does a liberated lens look like when we speak on misgiving in our homes, schools, and communities? And I only say that because it just reminds me of my grandmother. You know, she loved these holidays, and you wouldn't gonna be able to take away her Jesus. So I'm gonna leave it right there and just hear what you got to say to this, because I got a lot of family members who give a lot of pushback when it comes to trying to give and bring forth knowledge, and then they want to come back with, well, I think you might need Jesus. And it's like, well, do you know that was a character in a book? You know, but they don't want to hear me, or they don't want to see me coming. So how do you do it?
Right. Well, when we look at Thanksgiving, and Dr. Shakamusa Barashango in his book African People and European Holidays called it Misgiving Day. I would ask people, well, how do you think Native Americans look at it? Because many Native Americans celebrate a National Day of Mourning, okay? And they commemorate, 1621, and what people look at as the first Thanksgiving Day feast between those on the Mayflower and the Wampanoag Native Americans. They celebrate a National Day of Mourning, okay? And there's each year I post articles dealing with this. This is one from 2021 from CNN. National Day of Mourning turns Thanksgiving into something more honest. And the National Day of Mourning was created by Native Americans right around 1970. Okay. And what it does is it really, let's see. Okay. If we pull this, this is what I'll do. I'll pull this up. I'll do a screen share on this. So your audience can see this. Because and also I think it's the Washington Post. They had a really good article from I think 2024, because I have so many articles on this topic. They had one that deals with the descendants of the Native American nation who helped the Pilgrims, right? Mm-hmm. They regret that decision to help the Pilgrims. Okay. So when you understand this, and so in my lectures, I deal with understanding Thanksgiving from the Native American perspective, not the perspective of the conquerors. There's an article from Indian Country that I cite that tells the whole story of what people perceive as that first Thanksgiving in 1621. And we see that famous painting where, the white people are sitting there with the Native Americans, things like this. That's not even how all that that's not even how all that happened, right? But do
you got that article?
Yeah, I'll show it to you just a minute here.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so this right here, National Day of, can you see this article?
Yes.
National Day of Mourning turns Thanksgiving into something more honest. So this one is November 25th, 2021, CNN. And if we scroll down, so they talk about, okay, let's see here, 1637. Okay, if we go down, what are the origins of the National Day of Mourning? The day came about unexpectedly. In 1970, coordinators for the 350th anniversary of the Mayflower landing asked a respective Aakhu'Ra Wampanoag activist named Wamsutta Frank James to speak at the banquet they were planning. Mm-hmm. There are two federally recognized tribes of Wampanoag people, the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe and the Aakhu'Ra Wampanoag tribe. But the invitation hinged on one condition. He had to hand over a copy of the speech in advance. So they wanted to see in advance what he was going to say. Okay. So this reminds me of Frederick Douglass. What to the slave is your 4th of July? Okay, that's what this reminds me of. All right, now, Wamsutta Frank James wrote, quote, "It is with mixed emotion that I stand here to share my thoughts. This is a time of celebration for you, celebrating an anniversary of a beginning of the white man in America, a time of looking back, of reflection. It is with a heavy heart that I look back upon what happened to my people." All right. Now, the speech, which recalled horrors of such as Europeans' enslavement and murder of indigenous people, left the planners of this celebration stunned. Quote, "I think that they wanted a token native, and I think that they were expecting him to sing the praises of the pilgrims, to thank them for bringing civilization to these shores." Keisha James, who is a granddaughter of Wamsutta Frank James, as she told CNN, they said that he could. What is this saying? They said that he couldn't give that speech because it was too inflammatory, and that they'd write him a new speech, but he refused to have words put in his mouth. So this is the arrogance. Wait a second. He's talking about, you asked him to speak about what this day means, and he's talking about it from the perspective of his people who were killed in his land that was stolen. And you want him to, just like they do on Dr. King Day, they want to get speakers that make white people feel comfortable with the oppression of black people.
Right.
Okay. So what happens on the National Day of Mourning? The day is a blend of commemoration and protest. Participants meet at noon on the 4th Thursday of November at Coles Hill, COLE', Coles Hill, which is above the Plymouth Harbor area where Plymouth Rock lies. Also located there is a statue of Massasoit, who was a leader of the Wampanoags at the time of the Pilgrims' arrival. Okay, so that's what this is. And there's celebrations, and I post articles every year about the celebrations that take place for the National Day of Mourning. All right, MOURNING. So we need to dig into that history, and that coincides with what Dr. Shaka Musa Shango is talking about in African people, European holidays, and a mental genocide. Now, with that being said, I'm not against Black families coming together on, on what we call Thanksgiving Day, because most of us have the day off from work, right? And I'm not against, anytime families can come together, right. I'm not against that, because, that time next year, some of those family members may not be with us. And we don't want ideology to keep us away from family. Okay. But but family coming together on a particular day is different than family celebrating Thanksgiving in the European tradition of celebrating Thanksgiving.
Right.
Okay, so we have to understand the difference between the two.
And I do miss those sweet potato pies, but yeah, but no, in all seriousness, Baba, you're absolutely right. And it just, what you were saying just takes me back to last year. I gave a Juneteenth speech, but as I got to sharing about General Order Number 3 and what it really was and all of that, right? I probably was about 4 minutes into my speech, and she came up politely in my ear and said, "You got 2 minutes, wrap it up." And I'm thinking, but I have 15 on the docket, right? But I see exactly what you were saying, because it played out in real time for me last year. And look, check this out. And I'll land my plane with this just for time. But this year, Juneteenth is a national holiday. This year, we didn't even do a proclamation nor a celebration for Juneteenth this year.
Ashe. And yeah, Baba, we gather around tables built on blood. That's definitely not tradition. It feels more like, trauma. This is a horror reality, woven with stolen land, broken treaties, and lives lost in the name of conquest. What's being called a celebration often masks centuries of pain and survival against all odds. So, family, do you know that to truly honor our ancestors and ourselves, we must beyond the feast and the face, the wounds beneath. Only then can we heal, reclaim our stories, and build new traditions grounded not in erasure, but in truth and justice.
That, well, we don't know because there was a bill on the Iowa floor that was going to do away with DEI, all DEI initiatives. So the only two proclamations that did not get moved and voted on by council was Juneteenth and LGBTQ Day.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the only two that they haven't done this year. All else, they've done all other proclamations this year as they have done in years past, except for those two that I mentioned. So you tell me that there is something behind the scenes that we're talking about on that Project 25 that has come to fruition.
Absolutely. And Project 2025 attacks the history of non-white people. It attacks the teaching of the history of non-white people. But I'm interested to find out. Okay, what was it that you said that caused them to shorten your time giving your speech?
Well, I was I was talking about General Order Number 3.
Sure.
And Juneteenth was not. Or I'm trying to think.
It was not the last day of slavery.
It was not the last day of slavery.
Right. No.
I was trying to tell them that, but that doesn't register with them, and that it was over 2,000 colored troops that had to go down there to deliver the message.
Yeah, they were there with Major General Gordon Granger. He didn't go in by himself. Yeah. He had
So
2,000 troops, most of them colored troops. Yeah.
I'm sitting here giving them this version, which is the accurate, true version that most of them A, never heard of, or B, it was burning their ears up. It was a packed amphitheater. Right. And she came up behind me on the ear. She's facing the opposite way. I'm facing the crowd. Right. And she just says, smile, but you got 2 minutes to wrap it up.
Right. So I speak dealing with Juneteenth. I get deeper to the history, and I provide sources. I provide sources from history.com, official website of the History Channel. I provide irrefutable sources, and I encourage white people to challenge me on this. Okay, I go over what the original General Order Number 3 said. I read to them what it actually said, and I bring my documentation with me, because 90% of the 90% of the media coverage that you'll see, especially on cable news, they'll just talk about the first part of General Order Number 3, where it says all slaves are free. Mm-hmm. They won't talk about the next part where it says that they're supposed to stay on the plantation and work out labor agreements with their former slave masters, and that they're not allowed to gather at the post where the Union troops are and run behind Union lines, and that they're supposed to stay on the plantation. They won't deal with that. Most of the people don't know that Kentucky and Delaware, I think it was Kentucky and I think it was Delaware. Yeah, did not abolish slavery until December 18th, 1865. Okay, because they were exempt from the Emancipation Proclamation. Maryland, Missouri, Kentucky, and Delaware. Those 4 states were allowed to keep their slaves after the Emancipation Proclamation, January 1st, 1863. Because they stayed loyal to the Union and the Emancipation Proclamation only applied to the states or territories that had seceded from the Union and were in rebellion. So, Kentucky and Delaware didn't abolish slavery until 6 months after Juneteenth. This is verifiable fact.
Right.
This is irrefutable. December 18th is when the 13th Amendment was adopted. It's ratified December 6th, 1865, when Georgia becomes the 27th state to ratify the 13th Amendment. So when I break down the history, but by evidence, I don't have nobody challenge me. You can come if you want to. You're gonna walk away looking like Swiss cheese. You can come if you want to.
There was no challenge. I didn't even get that. Let me say it this way.
Yeah.
It was no challenge because I barely got out General Order number 3. Now, here's the part that I found interesting, and for this Reya'Sekmet, I know you're waiting over there, but I just want to share this with Baba Michael, and that is when I began my presentation, I started where what most people that was in the audience felt comfortable, because you had some people starting to shed tears and stuff like that, because I was talking about my grandmother. Now, see, my grandmother, peace be upon her, she passed away last year.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
But her mom, my great grandmother, was born in 1888, right? And her mom was a former enslaved person. Now, I was able to meet my great grandmother when she was 100 years old. In 1989, she was turning 101. And I was building up the story from that point, which was slavery. Okay, so, everybody's in tune. But when I got to that part about General Order number 3 and the colored troops going down there with General Gordon Granger, and I started getting into the heavy stuff, that's when she walked up. So I didn't see her. I don't know if she got the nudge for somebody or she just taken for somebody. I don't know. I just know that she gave me the 2-minute warning. And so I kind of just wrapped it up at that point. But again, if I had heavy hitters like you in the audience, that would have said, keep it going.
So one thing I would say is that we really have to organize our own Juneteenth celebrations. Okay, I spoke at one here, Juneteenth, Jubilee, Detroit, and I have I've been doing this for a few years. I have my 3-hour online deep dive into Juneteenth history lesson that I do. And then I've bought, because it's a 3-hour lecture and I sell on DVD to 2.5, 3 hours. I'll boil that down to a tight 30-minute presentation. But for this, speaking at this event, I did a 10-minute presentation and hitting them with fact after fact after fact. There was a battle that the last land battle in the Civil War happened 1 month after what happened 1 month after General Robert E. Lee surrenders to Ulysses S. Grant in Virginia, April 9th, 1865. The last land battle was May 12th, 1865, Palmetto Beach Ranch, which is outside of Brownsville, Texas. That battle was the last land battle of the Civil War. So a lot of people think the Civil War ended April 9th with General Robert E. Lee surrendering. For all practical purposes, but it doesn't come to an official end for 16 months, for another 16 months. It's not until August 1866 that President Andrew Johnson announces the official end to the Civil War. So this goes back to what we talked about in the beginning of this conversation, how people have all these misconceptions of history. And every year, every Juneteenth, man, I'm looking at MSNBC, CNN, I'm looking at things in mainstream media, and they're getting these things wrong about Juneteenth when they say it's the last day of slavery. And a lot of that is a lot of these people in media don't understand history, number one. Let's start there. They don't understand history. Number two, they're trying to make white people feel comfortable with the oppression of African people. Mm-hmm. Okay? So this is how you get these lies being told. And as I explained to people, Juneteenth is an opportunity for African Americans to force into a national conversation a history that people are passing laws and state legislatures to suppress the teaching of that history.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we have to correct the history of Juneteenth and protect the history of Juneteenth. So we can't allow the history to be co-opted and watered down, things of this nature. But with Juneteenth, it's important for us to understand that we have to understand a period of history as opposed to one day in history.
Facts.
Because that Juneteenth takes you to the Reconstruction era, 1865, 1877, right? And the collapse of Reconstruction and the backlash that was inflicted upon African Americans who are acquiring land and gaining rights and voting, things of this nature. So a lot of people want to say, oh, clap their hands, oh, the slaves were free. Oh, you don't wait, hold on. We weren't given land. We weren't given money, compensation, tools, things like this, right? And even the acres of land that was given under Special Field Order number 15, known as 40 acres and a mule, most of that land is going to be taken back by President Andrew Johnson, right? So we have to control the narrative and not allow Juneteenth to be co-opted to make people feel comfortable with the oppression of African Americans.
Yeah, facts. And I just wanted to bring that up quickly because when you were telling the story about the Native American Day of Mourning, it just took me back to that moment that I had. And that was, again, I've spoken about Juneteenth on several occasions, and that's never happened to me by somebody that looked like me, you know, to stop me in mid-flight like that. But again, thank you for bringing that to the table. And
okay, so let's keep going.
Okay.
Because we're in October, and Bob and Michael, if it's all right with you, we really don't want to leave our discussion without talking a bit about Halloween.
Sure.
What are people really celebrating?
So with Halloween, you're dealing with you're dealing with a celebration that combines holidays coming from the Celtics, the Druids, as well as the Romans. Okay. And I've done presentations dealing with this, and you're really dealing with a combination of three different celebrations: Samhain, Pomona, and Feralia. Let's do this for the sake of time. Let's go to. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna bring up current slide. Let's go here. I want to show you this here. So it's a fascinating holiday. I don't celebrate Halloween, but it's a fascinating understanding of the history. Can you see the slide?
Yes.
Origins of Halloween. Okay. So you have Samhain, it's spelled Samhain, but pronounced Sowen. It's an ancient Celtic festival that dates back about 2,500 years ago in the areas today called Ireland, the United Kingdom, and northern France. Now, you also have Pomona, which was the Roman goddess of fruit trees and a symbol of abundance. And you have Feralia, which was an ancient Roman festival of the dead celebrated on February 21st with prayers and sacrifices on behalf of the deceased. Okay. So Samhain means summer's end and occurred on November 1st. This was amongst the Druids, who were Celtics. This was their New Year's Day. And the harvest was collected to prepare for the winter, which could be deadly. Now, on October 31st, which was Samhain Eve, it was believed that the boundary between the worlds of the living and the dead became blurred, okay? And they believed that the ghost of the dead returned to earth from sundown to sundown, from that eve to the next day. And they would wear masks so that the ghost or the spirits wouldn't know who they were. Okay. Now this time of the year was thought to be the most favorable for the Celtic Druid priests to make predictions about the future, divination, etc. It was believed that witches, goblins, black cats, and ghosts of the dead would roam the living world on October 31st. So people will wear masks to disguise themselves and keep the ghosts from attacking them. Usually, they would wear animal heads and skins and dress up like ghosts, things of this nature. People will also leave food and wine on their doorstep to keep the ghost moving along. Huge sacred bonfires were burned where people would gather to burn crops and make animal sacrifices to the Celtic deities. The Celtics are going to be conquered by the Romans, by the Roman Empire, 43 AD, which leads to a Roman influence. Okay, so you're going to have these different celebrations, and then Feralia is going to be taken over by what's known as All Saints Day, the last day of an ancient Roman festival of the dead, celebrated on February 21st. Prayers and sacrifices were made on behalf of the deceased. The dead were commemorated on this day. So you're going to have these celebrations that are going to be experienced by different groups of people. And here in the United States, we're going to have the celebration of Halloween, largely for children, and trick-or-treating and Halloween parties, things of this nature. But Halloween is also one of the biggest holidays when it comes to spending, buying Halloween costumes, things of this nature.
Yeah, we don't celebrate it.
Yeah, right. You also have what a lot of people hear about All Souls Day or All Saints Day. Let me just you have All Saints Day, but then also you have All Hallows Eve and things of this nature. But also All Souls Day was created in 1000 AD. The Christian church made this on November 2nd. It is believed that church wanted to replace the Celtic Festival of the Dead with a related church-approved holiday. The celebration of All Souls Day was similar to Samhain, going back to the Celtics, back to the Druids. People would burn big bonfires, have parades, and dress up in costumes of angels, saints, and devils. So you have All Saints Day became known as All Hallows Day, which is known as Hallows Eve or Halloween. So Halloween comes from Hallows Eve. So when you start studying how you have different cultures influencing this celebration that some people celebrate today, it goes back to the Romans, goes back to the Celtic Druids, all this, and the influence from the Christian church as well.
Absolutely. So are you following pretty good? Yeah. Does this change your mindset about Halloween?
Indeed. Facts. Here's a story for my young listeners who may be struggling to understand where we're staying today about Columbus, Misgiving, and Halloween. There was once a river that ran clear through the center of a village. The elders said it carried memory. Every drop held the laughter, the grief, the songs, and the names of those who came before. Children were taught to drink from it slowly with reverence because it wasn't just water, it was legacy. But one day strangers arrived. They built fences around the river. They poured dye into its flow and called it new, and told the villagers to forget the old names. They said this is progress, this is education, and slowly the children stopped asking questions. They drank the water fast. They forgot the songs. But one child out of all of that began to dig. She followed the river upstream past the fences, past the dye until she found the stores. Still clear, still singing. She cupped her hands, drank deeply, and remembered. Tell me that child is me. That child is you. That child is all of us who refuse to sip silence and call it tradition. So when we speak on Columbus, on Misgiving, and or on Halloween, We're not just challenging holidays, we're tracing the river back to its source. Ashe, let's keep building.
Now,
Well,
some people in the some African Center people celebrate Ancestors Day. So they'll dress up as an African ancestor, okay, and have a celebration totally separate from Halloween. Not worried about the devil or evil spirits, things like
right.
this. But they'll honor their ancestors and dress up as an ancestor, and have separate celebrations dealing with that.
Yeah, and we choose to use that day as Information Day, doing what we're doing right here with you. So that's our way of combating and trying to break the cycle of what was fed to myself and others when we were growing up. You know,
Right.
so yeah, this is right up her alley.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
So, Baba, I usually do a segment called a fun question from the segment zone. But today,
Okay.
I want to share one of the many emails and comments I received after Baba Rassar and I posted on our video on Columbus.
Okay.
And our conversation today. That just confirms that we're presenting the truth. So, there's a segment that I do called a community mic check, and I asked for people's thoughts on information we put out, and some folks responded. So the messages are written with deep resonance, while others
Take your time, Reya'Sekmet. Take your time.
they test our balance. I say all of that to say, I want to share one message with you to hear your thoughts on this person's statement. So this question came from someone named @HistoryMom247. She had a
Okay.
strong reaction to our Juneteenth and Columbus episode. She says, I watched the video you posted about Juneteenth and most recently Columbus. And honestly, I'm concerned. It feels like Reya'Sekmet is being fed a one-sided narrative. Almost like she's being brainwashed. Rassar seems to be pushing misinformation, under the guise of African-centered truth, along with that Michael person. This is exactly the problem with these so-called alternative histories.
That Michael person, she was talking about me. Okay,
And me, for that matter, right?
So what was it? What was it specifically she was objecting to? Because oftentimes when people get confronted with the truth that contradicts what they've been told, they automatically reject it without doing any research. So what was it specifically that was said that she objected to? Do you know?
She didn't. That's the thing. It wasn't. She didn't specify. She just said that we were providing this alternative truth and corrupting the mind of a young child. And, and she I mean, it was one thing to throw me under in the fire, but she kind of lumped you into that too. So
okay. So
just to get your understanding of that.
So I would say visit my website, AfrikanHistoryNetwork.com, AfrikanHistoryNetwork.com. Email me through the website and address with specificity what it is that you are objecting to. And if you have any evidence to back up your argument, please provide it and I will respond to you.
Michael, I have another one. But before I read this next comment, is it okay that I read it as a true student of information and learning? So it's important to me that I hear your thoughts. Is that okay, Bible?
Sure. Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead.
Wait. I mean, you don't have to answer this stuff. It's just that we get comments and emails, and some are very comical. A lot of them are in support of what we do. But yeah. And some of them, you know, as Reya'Sekmet says, kind of hate. And so, you know, it's always good to know what information besides what we have in our toolbox that we can add to our toolbox to combat those people who are just so bullheaded and stubborn to go and do their research. So that's where this is coming from.
No problem.
Thank you. So, family, I want to be clear. I don't share these to entertain conflicts, but actually to expose the tension between truth and tradition. Some responses come from confusion. Others come from deep investment in stories that feel safe, even when they're incomplete. So this next comment is from someone who really believes in the holidays we've been questioning and sees our work as a problem.
Okay.
So this is from @BlackIrishLegacy22.
Wait. You say @BlackIrish22?
Yep.
That's already, a double negative, right? But go ahead.
I've been watching your episodes, and I have to say, this consistent rewriting of history is exhausting. You and Raj keep pushing this idea that everything we grew up with is a lie. I saw your Juneteenth interview with Baba Michael and Imhotep, and honestly, it feels like a stretch. You're trying so hard to rewrite history that you're losing credibility. And Halloween is a celebration of imagination. Thanksgiving is about gratitude and peace, and Harry Potter, that series, taught an entire generation about courage, friendship, and standing up to evil. You talk about African-centered truth like it's the only truth. What about the histories who spent their lives studying the events? What about the textbooks, the museums, the traditions passed down for generations? Honestly, it feels like you're trying to put Black people into abandoning joy, wonder, and unity, all for the sake of some extreme ideology. You're not just liberating minds, you're confusing them. Yeah, I'm not responding to that. Baba Rosa, would you like to respond?
Yeah. So basically, Baba, I'm trying to put it on the screen.
Okay.
And she's trying to read the blurb off the screen for what that person says. So basically, it's just another one of people who watch from a distance that obviously watch our shows, but want to just listen to respond, opposed to actually listening and digesting the information. And if they do have disagreement or something that's hard for them to understand, they are refusing to do their research, which I'm sure that's probably millions of people that are on these social media platforms and stuff like that. But I do want to respond to that, and I'll do my best to try to keep it cool, right? Because
okay, go ahead.
we usually don't even respond to this, but this is what Reya'Sekmet wants. This is her segment. So, but can I just speak to the family on this?
Yeah.
Okay. So, Baba Michael.
Yes.
I believe you answered it very well earlier when you said send them to your website, tell them to, have their specific area that they have a concern with, so on and so forth. But I would just say that on Columbus, on Misgiving, on Juneteenth, Halloween, we're not rewriting history. I would say that we're restoring it. What that person calls an alternative narrative are actually primary truths, right? That I would say are primary truths that were buried beneath conquest, curriculum, and colonial comfort, family. Baba Michael Imhotep has spent decades documenting timelines, cross-referencing sources, and citing scholars whose work predates the textbooks you define.
Facts.
There's Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, Dr. John Henry Clark, Dr. Sheikh Anthony Joe, Dr. Marimba Ani, and that's just to name some of our master scholars. These are not fringe voices, family. These are foundational minds in the global study of African history. So when we say Africans reached the Americas 130,000 plus years ago, we're not speculating on this, family. We're citing peer-reviewed findings, lava-embedded footprints, and skeletal remains that challenge Eurocentric timelines. When we say Juneteenth is layered, we're not dismissing celebration. We're exposing the delay of freedom, as Baba Michael has so eloquently stated. This is manipulation of memory, and I would say that it's the need to honor truth over tradition. And I'll land my plane with this, Reya'Sekhet. I know we haven't mentioned Harry Potter in any of our conversations, more or less any of our podcast episodes. I don't even know where that even came from, but
Right.
okay, they can have it.
But let me say this: most the people that watch your broadcast that criticized what I had to say about Juneteenth or what you had to say about Juneteenth probably have not researched the history of Juneteenth.
Facts.
Okay, I found out about Juneteenth in about 1994. I found out about Juneteenth 30 years ago. A lot of those people probably just found out about Juneteenth in the last 4 or 5 years. So they haven't read any slave narratives, like a Felix Haywood, who was there in Galveston, Texas, and got the news that they were freed. They don't understand the history of the Civil War and what leads up to it, don't understand that period of time, and don't even understand that the Emancipation Proclamation did not free the slaves, why the 13th Amendment was needed to amend the U.S. Constitution, okay, to really understand the actual history behind what happened. So they're just reacting to something that contradicts what they have believed for however long they've been believing it. When we look at so I want to share this on the screen quickly here. So people talk about revisionist history and things like this. Anytime something contradicts what they've been taught, they automatically want to attack it without researching the validity of the new information that they're learning. So they'll call the new information that they're learning revisionist history, right? So if we look at this article, can you see this article on the screen?
Yes.
Okay, so this is from 2015, and this is in my archive. I have thousands of articles archived. This is from Huffington Post. Mom slams textbook's incredibly offensive definition of slavery in viral Facebook post. Okay, so in this article, it says, okay, so this the the child was 15 years old. His name is, at the time, Kobe Byrne, 15 years old, underscored this pinpoint when he sent his mom, Ronnie Dean Byrne, a photo of a page from his 9th grade world geography textbook, which wrongly described African slaves as quote unquote workers. Dean Byrne posted her son's text message to her Instagram page. And it says this right here: the Atlantic slave trade between the 1500s and 1800s brought millions of workers from Africa to the southern United States to work on agricultural plantations. Okay. So then they talk about, this misinformation here. If we look here at another one, now this is, I deal with this in my classes. This was an article from Time magazine that deals with how the history of Reconstruction is not taught in schools largely across the country. A new report, can you see this on the screen?
Yes.
Okay, Time magazine. Okay, now this is a white publication, so this should make those people happy, those detractors. A new report finds that 45 states are failing to teach students about the period that shaped race relations after the Civil War. Okay, and long story short, this is why understanding history is important. Now, Eric Foner is one of the top historians on the Reconstruction era. He's a white historian, so those people that say, I don't know what I'm talking about, should feel very comfortable getting this from a white man. Eric Foner said the events we saw, now he's talking about the January 6th insurrection, okay? Because this article came out January 12th, 2022, a little more than 1 year after the January 6th insurrection. In the aftermath of the insurrection a year ago at the U.S. Capitol, many leading historians drew parallels between the violence that we saw that day and the Reconstruction era, the period of political revolution directly after the American Civil War. White historian Eric Foner said, the events we saw reminded me very much of the Reconstruction era and the overthrow of Reconstruction, which was often accompanied or accomplished, I should say, by violent assaults on elected officials. Eric Fowler, Pulitzer Prize-winning historian and author of Reconstruction, America's Unfinished Revolution, 1863 to 1877, said in an interview with the New Yorker published a week later. Now, scholars say, studying, this doesn't say Michael Imhotep says this, it says scholars say studying the aftermath of the Civil War can help people, can help put in context many of the most seminal events in the U.S. in recent history, from the brutal murder of George Floyd by police in 2020 to the I think it's voter suppression. What is this saying? To the suppression, the voter suppression laws enacted after Black voters played a big role in the election of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, being elected president and vice president in 2020. But despite the timeliness of the era, in today's climate, many students in American schools will not get a full education on Reconstruction until they get to college. Mm-hmm. So then they go through and tell you how in social studies standards, 45 of 50 states and the District of Columbia either teach a partial history of Reconstruction or don't teach it at all. And this is why you have people sending you messages like that, because they haven't done the research. They haven't been taught this history.
Yeah, and I'm glad you put that on the screen for the family, and because it just leads me right into what I was thinking earlier, and that was, we're not trying to take away nobody's celebration. You know, right. We're not trying to attack nobody's joy. We are actually asking, family, whose joy was it built on and whose joy got erased? This isn't about guilt, right, Reya'Sekhet? You know, it's about clarity, family. It's about legacy. It's about refusing to sip silence and call it tradition. So to those who feel discomfort, I hear you. Reya'Sekmet hear you. Baba Michael Imhotep hears you. But discomfort is not oppression. Correction is not confusion. And truth is not a threat, family. So again, Reya'Sekmet, and Baba Michael Imhotep, we build with reverence, with research, and with balance, rooted in our soil. Ashe.
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 Begin.
I don't know if you got that, but okay. All right. Okay. You know what? Since I think you got jokes, but since you heard our take on the comments, how about you share with Michael Imhotep, Baba Michael Imhotep, what Reya'Sekmet has to say about those comments? I'm sure, Baba, wouldn't you want to hear what she has to say about those comments?
Yes.
What you pick up your mic?
Really? Wow, you just gonna put me on the spot.
You on the spot.
Baba Michael, do you really want to hear from me?
Yes. Go ahead.
Okay, so apparently I thought about this. And to those who've questioned what we're doing here on the J&J-Life podcast, I hear you. But I need you to understand something. I didn't come to this platform to entertain confusion. I came to restore clarity. What I've learned from Baba Reya'Sekhet and Baba Michael Imhotep isn't just information. For me, it's transformation. It's the kind of truth that doesn't ask for permission to be spoken. And it's the kind of truth that's been buried beneath textbooks, traditions, and trauma. Mm-hmm. You say we're rewriting history, we say we're remembering it. You say we're confusing minds, we say we're liberating them. I say, and I've read the timelines. I've studied the migrations, so I've seen the evidence from the lava footprints to ancient artifacts to suppressed scholarships that are predates your curriculum. And I've learned that Juneteenth is not just a celebration. Mm-hmm. It's a delay, a manipulation, and a reminder that freedom was rationed and truth was censored.
Take your time. Take your time. You got a lot to say, obviously.
Right.
I know. But seriously, family, I've learned that Halloween is not just costumes. It's a ritual that masks forgetting. And Thanksgiving is not just a gratitude. It's genocide wrapped in gravy. And I've come to know that Harry Potter might teach courage. But does it teach who we are? No, exactly. Before wands and wizardry were weaponized against our own cosmologies. So no, I'm not confused. I'm not brainwashed, nor am I bitter. I'm awake, aligned, and building with the ones who refuse to sip on silence and call tradition. Ashe.
Well, Ashe.
Ashe.
Family, this wasn't just an interview today. I call it a readjustment. Bob and Michael gave us the blueprint to dismantle the calendar and reconstruct our consciousness. So next time you think about celebrating one of these so-called holidays, ask yourself, whose blood built this ritual and whose memory is being erased? Come on, family, you should know this stuff.
Facts. Ashe.
Right.
So Baba, is there anything that we didn't touch on today that you wanted to talk about? And we know you do your thing on the Roland Martin show, Roland Martin Unfiltered. But is there anything coming up for you in the near future that the family should know about? Speaking engagements? Are you still doing those tours? Stuff like that?
I would say visit my website, AfrikanHistoryNetwork.com. Upcoming events we'll have there. I know I'm speaking for the AKAs here, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority here in Detroit on the 30th. Is dealing with Project 2025, and I'm speaking at the State of the City address Wednesday, October 22nd. But we'll get all that on my website, AfrikanHistoryNetwork.com. Follow me on Facebook and fan base at The African History Network, The African History Network. I have a little over 1 million followers on my Facebook page. Follow me on YouTube and Instagram at Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP. Okay, and then I rebroadcast my shows and videos on my social media platforms, especially Facebook and YouTube. Usually do broadcasts Sundays, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm on Roland Martin Unfiltered every Friday, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Roland's YouTube channel and Facebook, providing historical and political analysis dealing with today's stories. And Roland's show, Roland Martin Unfiltered, is in the top 100 of the YouTube podcasts. Okay, I've been on this show 5 years. October. Actually, this month is marks 5 years of me being on Roland Martin Unfiltered. I've been on almost every Friday for 5 years. So check us out there. You can support us through Cash App, $ the AHN show through Cash App, $ the AHN show through Cash App, and through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN show. We have the information around the homepage of our website, and information about my online classes is on my website as well, AfrikanHistoryNetwork.com. So I would say to you all, thanks for having me today, and keep up the good work that you're doing. Asante Sana and Mod Hotep.
Okay.
For none of this information provided today, do your research. There you have it, family. Until next time, please absolutely just down like button and subscribe.
Study what Baba Michael has presented and educate yourself, family.
Unity, family. Reya'Sekmet is out.
Yes. All right. Peace.
Peace and love is the key. Ra represents the essence of truth, justice, harmony, balance, order, and humanity, reciprocity, and righteousness. J&J-Life podcast. The J&J-Life podcast was created to give the family a place and platform to embrace their spiritual awakening and consciousness. J&J-Life is dedicated to showcasing the beauty of our culture, educating our people and those that want to learn this work. Smash that like button. Peace and love is Nikki.